licensed psychiatrist, and after a 10-minute visit, no family history at all, he was given a prescription for Paxil, and out the door we walked. At this point, I was a firm believer in the chemical imbalance theory. Over the next 3 months, he actually did better. His dose of Paxil went from 12.5 to 25 on an automatic increase. His claustrophobia went away. He was a little bit more outgoing. Things were looking good. I was quite happy. By the end of the 4th month, we were seeing some strange behaviors, a little aggressive, getting calls from teachers that homework wasn't being handed in. This was a straight A student prior to Paxil. Called his psychiatrist, explained what I was seeing, and his answer was, he's a large boy, we'll increase the dose. He went to 37.5. He was a large boy because at this point he had already gained 25 pounds on the Paxil with no dietary changes. Things went fine for about a month and a half. He was doing fine. School was out. He was out with friends, being a little belligerent at home, but writing it off as teenage angst. By September, he went back into school. I get a call from the school that he's now sleeping through class. He has now told off his Spanish teacher, who has kicked him out of the classroom completely. This was a child who wouldn't say boo to anybody. Called his psychiatrist. His dose was increased to 50 milligrams of Paxil CR. It was in December of 2003 when he was assaulted by a group of kids at school. To this day, we really don't know the whole story. We don't think he was as innocent as he led us to believe. He was angry. He was aggressive. He was belligerent to us. He was belligerent to teachers. He had had a complete personality change. After the assault, that kind of slowed him down for a little bit. Found out later the reason he was slowed down was because he was doing his own research. Upstairs in my house on his computer, I found all the ingredients for bomb making and web searches for the anarchist workbook. He was going to blow up his school in retaliation for this fight. It was at this point that obviously I am now petrified. I call his psychiatrist, who tells me there's nothing I can do. He's a danger to himself and others. I hit the internet and Googled for my medical advice, even with my 24 years of nursing experience, that at that time, that's when I found Paxil Progress. Paxil Progress is a web-based support group for antidepressant withdrawal, for people going through it. It's peer-to-peer, people who have been there, people who have gotten off these drugs, people who are getting off these drugs, and the occasional person who comes in and loves their drug. It was this group of people, strangers to me, that started explaining to me what I was seeing in my son was classic Paxil. Classic Paxil side effects. I talked to other parents of teens, parents of children as young as 8 who were on Paxil at the time. Now I recognized that he needed to come off this. Called his psychiatrist, asked for a weaning schedule, gave me a weaning schedule and told me to go from 50 milligrams of Paxil CR to 37.5. Also had contacted a psychologist, and I have nothing but love for this man. I called him out of the phone book, had no idea what I was dealing with at this point, had no idea what was to come in the very near future. This lovely man called me back. Turns out he was a specialist in post-traumatic stress disorder, which actually kind of fit the bill quite nicely, as we ultimately discovered later on. I weaned Ryan from 50 to 37.5 on his psychiatrist's advice. 2 weeks after the wean, he was a little lethargic, was vomiting, called his psychiatrist. He said, it's the Paxil flu. Don't worry about it, he'll be fine. The next morning, Ryan woke up and we had a 5-hour psychotic rage. Turned out the lethargy from the night before, he had attempted to overdose on the Xanax that he was given to cover the side effects of the Paxil, which I had never allowed him to take. For 5 hours, he raged. Brought out, last count, during the rage, brought out 16 different knives that he had hidden in his room. He was quoting Shakespeare. He was born to die. I didn't know what was going on. I had never been prepared for this. I was not prepared for any possibility of withdrawal other than the Paxil flu symptoms. For 5 hours, I listened. And I listened to him talk about how this drug was killing him, that he had tried to tell us that we weren't listening, that he was death obsessed for the last 14 months that he was on the drug. Got out of my sight for about 10 seconds. In that time period, slashed his wrists. Came back into the room bleeding. I was forced to call the police, which was something I did not want to do. but I was home alone. This child was now 287 pounds, having gained a total of 87 pounds on Paxil. There was no way I could control him. Called the police, who knew Ryan, knew him well because we live in a small town. Everybody knew him. Ended up being admitted to a psychiatric unit. 24 hours back in the psychiatric unit, back on Paxil 25 milligrams, and he was absolutely fine. Turned out that what I thought was a wean from 50 to 37.5, he had so had it with the side effects of the Paxil, he had stopped taking it. So he was in cold turkey withdrawal after 10 days off of Paxil. 25 milligrams completely stopped the cold turkey withdrawal. At this point, the light finally went on. They had called me. They had diagnosed him now with bipolar. And I said, no, we're done now. And I'll be taking him out. And they pulled the sign for the 72-hour hold. And at this point, I had gotten a little smarter. And I said, you can release him now, or I can call Ed Silverman, who's the pharmaceutical reporter for the Newark Star Ledger in New Jersey, which was one of the biggest newspapers, and we can discuss this on the front steps of the hospital. He was released to me in about 30 seconds. His psychiatrist refused to take him back as a patient, not that we were going back anyway, because of the suicide attempts. His psychologist stood by my side as we walked him now through Paxil withdrawal. Until you have witnessed it, you cannot even imagine what it's like to get off these drugs. This child went through the next year from anywhere from complete insomnia. He would be awake for 72 hours. He would sleep for 36. He would be awake for 8. It was just bizarre for the next year. He went from being this aggressive child out with friends on Paxil to complete agoraphobic. Could not leave the house at all. The only time he left was with me at his side, going to see his psychologist. This ebbed and waned as we weaned down lower and lower and lower until he was completely off. It took about 9 months post-weaning before he started to even feel like himself again. This is not an uncommon thing in antidepressant weaning. Paxil Progress, the website that brought this information to me, is now my website. I took it over about 2.5 years ago when the original creator of it decided it was time for him to move on with his life after his Paxil withdrawal experience. So I now run it. The site has exploded since the recent information has come out over the last 3 years. Realizing that I knew nothing in 2003, you can see the difference in information now. We are now getting 3.1 million hits per month from people all over the world. I speak to people in China, in Australia, in New Zealand, in the UK. We cover every country. This is peer-to-peer 24-hour support. We also have come up through over the last 3 years with a weaning schedule that we found allows people to function when they're coming off these drugs. The children have the advantage of we can keep them home from school. Adults need to be able to function while they're getting clean. You can't do it with the way that the doctors are telling people, skip a day. You can't skip a day. It's a 21-hour half-life drug. We try to explain everything that we're doing. We give them the guidelines that we have found through trial and error that actually work. We obviously let them know we are not medical professionals. This is advice to take to your doctor, to empower your doctor, and to empower your relationship with your doctor to get him to do what you want him to do. Liquid Paxil has become our greatest friend. What we're telling people now, what we're advising people now is coming off of Paxil a little bit easier because you do have the liquid. It's gotten down to the amounts have to be so minuscule or people crash. When I first started doing this, people used to do it 5 milligrams at a time. Wean 5 milligrams, wait 2 weeks, wean another 5 milligrams. We're finding through talking to people all over the world, people are crashing doing that. We've now come up with a system that we now have 10 people doing what we call the 10% wean, which is you take your dose, you wean by 10% of your previous dose every 3 to 4 weeks. Takes a long time to get off, but people are successfully getting off. They're not crashing, they're functioning, they're able to go to work, and they're getting free of these drugs without the protracted withdrawal that we are seeing in some of the earlier situations. One of the first posts that someone makes on the board invariably when they come is, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're here. I thought I was crazy." It's that peer support that keeps people going because people don't understand what's going on with them. I'd like to read one of the best posts I've ever seen in my life. This person is now a moderator on my board because obviously I can't handle this completely by myself. She was put on Paxil for pregnancy-induced hypertension. She was 3 months pregnant at the time. She was on Paxil throughout the whole pregnancy. Her child went through withdrawal. Luckily was weaned because she breastfed. This is her explanation of what she experienced on Paxil. The most insidious thing about Paxil is that most people don't feel totally different after they take it. Unless you've been completely crippled with anxiety or depression, the change is very slow and subtle. One day you do realize that you feel good. You're not worried about anything more. You're not getting uptight about things that bug you. You're not having road rage. Your appetite picks up and you start eating more. But that's because you were too depressed or too anxious to eat before, right? Then you start packing on the pounds, but you don't care that much because you're happy. Well, maybe not joyous, but who is? You're placidly satisfied. And that is a desirous change from your pre-Paxil existence. After a while, you start to think maybe it's not too healthy to have gained the 20 to 40 pounds. So you decide to start working out and watch what you eat. Only you can't muster the energy to work out. In fact, you can barely muster the energy to do what you need to do to get through the day. And you want to eat, but you never feel full. You always feel deprived. Then one day you realize that it's great to not have road rage, but it really sucks to not be able to cry when your child is born, or to feel grief when a loved one dies. To not be thrilled when your favorite team wins the championship, but then again, you haven't had the attention span to follow a game. You no longer belly laugh at your favorite comedian. You have emotionally flatlined. Paxil is a trickster. At first it seems like nothing, then it seems great. The negatives come on so slowly that you might not even see them until someone else points them out to you. I didn't. Kim is now successfully off Paxil, works with me on the board. Her daughter is now 3 years old, Paxil-free, with hopefully no residuals. My son is now 19. He is also Paxil-free. Anxiety, depression are no longer part of his life. What is part of his life is an intermittent adrenal insufficiency and an intermittent pseudoparkinsonism that pops up. Pops up, goes away, pops up. No one has an explanation for it. The only thing that we can come up with is the 14 months of Paxil use. So he survived. He's a tough kid. He will survive, but now he deals with the ramifications of possibly lifetime physical problems due to the Paxil. But it doesn't get him down. He knows I'm here. He encourages me to go, so that's where we go. When you all go to Congress on Monday, I can't be here. I do have to go to work. Give them my regards because I have spoken to all of them already. Thank you.
Laurie, thank you very much. It was very enlightening, and it's very painful to listen to what you went through, and the same thing for you, Teresa. But I think this is the only way we can reach the people in this audience and let them know the truth of real people and what these drugs and what these screenings are doing to real people in our United States. And if it helps motivate us, you've done your job, I think. I think you made a good point that we need to reach out and save as many people as we can from both these scourges. I'd also like to recognize another very courageous and brave mother who spoke to us last year. Is Matthew Downing here? Matthew, please stand up. As you remember, Matthew spoke to us last year, and she's another courageous mother who's trying to save the lives of other children. Okay, now we have, I know you're kind of tired, you've eaten. I hope you have a few more minutes to listen to our in-house Sergeant at Arms and comedian, court jester. I'm sure I'm going to be pilloried here. So I'd like to